Now, ladies and gentlemen, welcome back. I hope that everyone has enjoyed their lunch, and hopefully no one will fall asleep, because in the next hour or so, we'll be delving into one of the hottest and challenging topics regarding global media. That you're joining us here at Panel 2. The session is about cultural diversity and global media. And we can't think of a better person to lead this conversation than Professor Eun-mee. She is teaching at the Department of Communication at Seoul National University. She's also currently serving as Director of the Program in Information and Communication Technology and Culture. Please welcome Professor Eun-mee.
Thank you, and welcome to our afternoon session on cultural diversity and global media. Culture has always been the thing about media. I saw in the outlines of this whole conference that we're also talking about a lot of security issues, national safety, those hard issues, but this is more soft issue, but more important issue in my regards. In the old days, it's always, when you talk about global media and cultural diversity, it's been always like Western cultures promulgating throughout the world through MTVs and all the other big networks from the Western area. But nowadays, the media environment is much more exciting, much more complex. Everywhere in the world, you have access to myriads of personal media, accessing to different voices and of course, an array of different cultures. We have a very exciting and very excellent panel with such a diverse background, from diplomacy to the media producers to journalists who have been stationed in many, many different worlds. So I'm sure we'll have exciting afternoon session, although this is the hard time right after lunch. Everybody feels a little bit drowsy and down, but the exciting panel that we have here will insight you to the whole new world of cultural diversity and global media. I'd like to introduce our panelists first, from the gentleman next to me, Mr. Petar ANDONOV. He's a Bulgarian ambassador to Korea, but in the past he has he's a background of economics, media, public planning, and diplomacy as well. Welcome. Next to Ambassador ANDONOV, we have Mr. Brent BYERS. He is from the US Embassy in Korea. He is currently serving as a Minister Counselor for Public Affairs. Next to Mr. BYERS, we have Mr. KAVALAMUTHU, is a Deputy Director, RTM, and he's from Malaysia. He has a background in production and broadcasting, and he's the person who can tell you more about how entertainment programs might be influencing people's perception of cultural diversity. And next to is Mr. RAIMKHANOV. He is currently a vice chairman from Kazakhstan Republic TV and Radio Corporation. Kazakhstan is a familiar name to many Koreans because we have a lot of Korean immigrants now working and living there. Those are the 4 panelists we have. I understand that each of our panel has prepared some of the points that they would like to go over at first from their own experience and how global media can contribute to the media, and also at the same time at their own action everyday level, how they struggle to put more culturally correct perspective in their programs and news writing. So I'd like to hear first from the order, starting from Ambassador ANDONOV, how his experience can tell us more about how media functions in terms of global dialogue and cultural diversity. Go ahead, Mr. ANDONOV.
Thank you very much, dear participants in the Global Media Forum, ladies and gentlemen. First of all, please allow me to express my gratitude and special thanks to the organizers of the Global Media Forum, Arirang TV and Korea Foundation, to Madame Son Jie, President and CEO of Arirang TV, and Ambassador Kim, Chairman of Korea Foundation, for giving me this opportunity to talk to you. I'm not a person who is involved in the media theory, but I would like to share with you just some of my experience in the field of media, being a journalist for a very long time, working for Bulgarian National TV, TV Europe, and also for US radio station Radio Free Europe. First of all, I would like to say that especially these days, it's very important to have a synergy between diplomacy and media, because as you all of you know very well, diplomacy has to do a lot with the communication. And of course, that's the same with the media. And there is no doubt that the media could play an important role in promoting cultural diversity. It starts with media content and media practices. And this is very important because I think that the personal interests, personal beliefs and values of the journalists have to do a lot with promoting cultural diversity through the channels of global media. And I would like just to give you an example from my own experience. Just in my early days as a journalist working for Bulgarian National TV, I prepared a documentary movie on the economic success of South Korea, Singapore, Taiwan, and also Hong Kong, so-called Four Dragons. And it provoked a huge interest among the Bulgarian audience at that time. This documentary movie represented also to the biggest extent the cultural values of all these countries. Also, of course, I have always believed that global culture is following the path opened by economic globalization. There is a significant link between the efforts of different countries these days for overcoming economic slowdown to diversify their trade and investment flows. But the diversification of the trade and investment flows, also finding partners from other parts of the world for doing business together, is very closely linked to the encouragement of the cultural diversity. So I think that cultural exchanges are very important prerequisite for successful and business relationships. It has also to be recognized that the cultural vitality also depends on the contacts with other cultures. Interchanges should be encouraged to maintain the dynamism of different cultures, and in this regard, openness is very much needed. And now, as Bulgarian ambassador to Republic of Korea, I firmly believe that it's very important to work hard on securing a comprehensive flow of two-way cultural flows, actually, between from Korea to Bulgaria and from Bulgaria to Korea. These days, Korean pop music is extremely popular. It's part of the branding Korea in the whole world. So, for example, one of my, I should say, dreams, not tasks here in Korea, is to have a joint performance of joint song between young Bulgarian pop musician and young Korean pop musicians. Also, I would like to mention that based on my experience as a moderator and analyst with US radio station Radio Free Europe, in Bulgaria in the 90s. I would like to underline the significance of the international broadcasting for providing news analysis and discussions on domestic, regional, and global issues. And also, this flow of information is crucial to successful democratic and free market transformations, and also for strengthening the civil societies by the free market transformations. In this way, I think that, especially these days when we witness increasing tensions on the Korean Peninsula, the role of Radio Free Asia is of crucial importance for making people on the other side of the border, in North Korea, to have objective and unbiased information on the issues related to the tensions on the Korean Peninsula. Talking about Europe, because Bulgaria is a member of the European Union, in Europe cultural diversity is an integral part of European cultural identity, and the ability of the media to reflect the cultural diversity depends on the plurality of the media, and freedom of information implies that citizens will have the possibility to access a variety of information, primarily different opinions and ideas, but also in the wider context, a variety of cultural aspects and expressions. And I will conclude my remarks just by explaining part of my experience with in electronic media management for non-profit organizations, something which is very important. It's extremely important to link the cultural diversity to cultural factors which influence today's lives of the people with other forces in the society, political forces, regulatory environment, economic forces, technological developments, in order to perform so-called scenario-driven planning, cross-impact analysis. That is a very powerful instrument for global media for defining its mission statement, goals, objectives, and also its strategy in an uncertain environment. And with that, I would like to conclude my remarks and to thank you very much for your kind attention.
Thank you very much. Mr. Andonov is really a unique person with a mix of different careers, broadcasting, diplomacy, and media. And I think what interested me during your remarks is that the global media's role in the global culture, it really went with globalization of the market. And from your experience, how it's not maybe important only to convey certain information, it's the idea of free market, idea of freedom of expression that the media can portray to different parts of the world. And I also think that your point about how nonprofit media organization can play a certain role different from commercial operations, I think those 2 points are really worthwhile to focus. Next, we have Mr. Brent BYERS from the US Embassy. In previous life, he was in Ukraine, also Tel Aviv, Israel, and Islamabad, Pakistan as well. And he also taught broadcast and print journalism in the US educational institutes. And this is his second time in Korea working in the public affairs division in the US Embassy. Could you just share some of your points?
Sure. Thank you very much for the opportunity to be here. Can people hear? Yes? Okay, good. Because of my previous history as a journalist, I'm very interested in the future of journalism, and sometimes I worry about where we're headed these days. You face a lot of the same challenges that you have always faced. It's one of balance, trying to decide whether something is immediate enough that you have to report it, or whether you have to focus on the accuracy because of the 24-hour news cycle that you're facing, whether it's the right of your people to know what's happening versus privacy or security issues, whether you're a business and you're trying to attract ratings, or you have a congressional oversight committee that's looking at how you're spending your money, you have all of these kinds of pressures. So you're always trying to balance all of these various things as you meet the challenges that are out there. And now you have a new challenge, which is this great technology, which has taken what used to be just broadcasting, where people who own newspapers and radio stations and television stations, you could just put your message out there. But now you have all of these other people who are getting in the way of this traditional communication model of the one person, one source speaking to one listener. And now you've got all these other influencers. You've got people commenting on what you're saying. You've got people adding their own news to this kind of thing. So it's really complicated your life in ways that we didn't have 10 years ago. It's gotten much more difficult for you. And now with global broadcasting, you have this whole new wrinkle, which is cross-cultural communication. It's always difficult to communicate with somebody. The message that you send is never the one that's received. There's always some kind of difference because of the interpretation. And this is just amplified when you're crossing cultures. In the United States, when you say yes, it means yes. In some cultures, when you say yes, it means maybe. And when you say maybe, it means no. So just little things like that. And something is, we were talking earlier in this session before lunch about standardized journalistic standards, and what are those? What are those principles? What makes a professional journalism? Even those standards, I would argue, differ depending on where you've grown up. What has your experience been with your government? As we heard from our Colombian colleague, there's challenges in some places that maybe you don't face in other places. So the cultural environment that you grew up in also affects how you might approach some of these kinds of things. Because of the global reach, there's no such thing as a domestic audience anymore. I think our government officials need to understand that when they're speaking. Whenever anybody in the United States says anything about Korea, it immediately gets broadcast back here. And we have to be mindful of that. We can't be talking to one group of people and thinking, oh, we're on the other side of the world, they're never going to hear it, because they will in this new global environment. So we have to be aware of that. Some things haven't changed. Emotions still trump facts. Rumors always travel faster than the truth. One of the new things I think that has developed with the technology is that people who now believe the same kind of things, identify with the same causes, they can unite much more easily than they could in the past. And that's a good thing, because it empowers a lot of people who maybe previously didn't have a voice. But the challenge is, it also often gets people in a very tunnel vision type of approach to things, where they stop listening to other people's opinions. They only listen to people who agree with them. And I think that's a problem with our current environment. The other thing, that in many countries you can get on the internet and you have some kind of a moniker, something creative that you've thought up, and because you're not held accountable by name, you can say the most stupid things, the most outrageous things, and nobody knows, who you are. Nobody can hold you accountable. And I think this is a big challenge for us out there, because often those things just get repeated. So this is kind of the environment in which you're operating right now. And so what do we do with this? How do we approach this kind of thing? And I've got a whole list of prescriptions that on page 89, maybe some of you are following along. I think the first thing is do no harm. You have to balance whether a story that you're going to do will incite somebody in some other country or some other audience unnecessarily. You have to tell the truth, but some of these stories that are out there, some of the things that are published, I think sometimes people cross the line, and I think as global journalists in particular, you have to be mindful of these kinds of things. You still have to be the expert. Journalists have always had to be the experts before you can tell a story. It's more complicated now, because you have to know more about more things, just because of the nature of the media that's out there. And because of all these other sources of media now with people blogging and tweeting and all this kind of thing, there's an awful lot of noise out there. And I think one of the most important roles that journalists can play right now is helping to filter that noise. We still need editors. We still need somebody who can look at this stuff and say, you know, this doesn't make any sense. I'm not going to report that. As opposed to just blindly repeating it. And we still need, you know, double sourcing of stories and these kinds of things that, you know, as journalists you're all familiar with. But I think more and more people who are just overwhelmed by all of this information, they need journalists. They need somebody who's, you know, thoughtful and can take the time to do the research, to do the analysis. I think this is very important, and this is a critical role for the journalists as they go forward. I think you also are responsible for broadening people's horizons. You obviously you have people who like you because of maybe your editorial policies or something like that. But if you're only giving this one editorial line all the time, then you're not helping your readers understand the broader thing, because maybe they're only reading you. I think in Korea, people who read Chosun Ilbo don't read Hankyoreh. Similar in the United States. People who watch Fox News don't watch CNBC or maybe even CNN, and certainly not Jon Stewart. So I think that's one of the things that you can do is help broaden